Did you know who actually owns Apple, Microsoft, Amazon? It's not Steve Jobs' family, not Bill Gates, not Jeff Bezos anymore. It's three companies you've probably never heard of: BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. Together, they manage over $20 trillion in assets. That's more than the entire economy of China. These three firms are the largest shareholders in over 90% of companies in the S&P 500. Your iPhone, they own a chunk of Apple. Your Windows laptop, they own Microsoft. Your Amazon packages? Yep, them too. But here's the wild part. These three companies also own shares in each other. It's like a financial triangle where everyone's connected. So how did we get here? How did three firms end up holding shares in almost every major corporation in America? And what does it mean for you? Let's break it down. Let's start with the biggest one, BlackRock. BlackRock manages around $10 trillion in assets. To put that in perspective, that's larger than the GDP of every country except the US and China. Larger than Japan, Germany, and the UK combined. But here's the thing. BlackRock isn't a bank. They don't take your deposits. They're an asset manager. They manage money for pension funds, insurance companies, governments, and regular people through mutual funds and ETFs. BlackRock was founded in 1988 by a guy named Larry Fink. Fink was a bond trader who got fired after losing $100 million in a bad trade. So he started BlackRock with just $5 million and one goal: better risk management. And that's where things get interesting. BlackRock built a system called Aladdin. It stands for Asset, Liability, Debt, and Derivative Investment Network. Sounds boring, right? But Aladdin is massive. It doesn't just manage BlackRock's $10 trillion. It's used by insurance companies, pension funds, and even central banks around the world. In total, Aladdin tracks over $21 trillion in global assets. When Aladdin says an investment is risky, trillions of dollars avoid it. When it says something's safe, money floods in. BlackRock doesn't just invest money. They've built the operating system that helps the whole financial world assess risk. Now let's talk ownership. BlackRock is the largest shareholder in Apple, about 7.6% of the company, worth over $230 billion. They own similar stakes in Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Tesla, and Meta. In fact, BlackRock holds nearly $1 trillion in just the top tech companies alone. But it's not just tech. They're also the top shareholder in Exxon, Chevron, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, JP Morgan Chase, and Bank of America. Here's where it gets fascinating. They're the largest shareholder in companies that compete with each other: Coke and Pepsi, Exxon and Chevron, Pfizer and Moderna. Now, does that mean they control these companies? Not exactly. Being a large shareholder gives you voting power and influence, but it's not the same as running the business day to day. Still, every year Larry Fink writes a letter to CEOs, and when you own 7% of a company, CEOs listen. In 2020, Fink's letter focused on climate change. Within a year, nearly every major corporation announced net zero commitments. In 2021, he wrote about diversity and stakeholder capitalism. Suddenly, ESG reports were everywhere. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you're the largest shareholder in 90% of the S&P 500, your suggestions carry weight. Now, let's talk about Vanguard. Vanguard manages around $11 trillion. They're the second largest asset manager in the world. But here's what makes Vanguard really unique. Nobody owns Vanguard. Every other company has shareholders, people or institutions that profit when the company does well. Vanguard, no external shareholders. Vanguard is owned by its own funds, which means it's essentially owned by itself. This structure was designed by Vanguard's founder, John Bogle, back in 1975. Bogle wanted to create a company that served investors instead of shareholders, so he made the funds themselves the owners. Sounds noble, right? But here's what it actually does. It makes Vanguard nearly impossible to pressure or regulate. There's no CEO answering to shareholders, no board worried about stock price. Vanguard just exists. And with that structure, Vanguard is a massive shareholder in almost everything. They own about 8.2% of Apple, 8.6% of Microsoft, 7.8% of Amazon. They're the largest shareholder in Berkshire Hathaway, JP Morgan, Johnson & Johnson, Visa, and Procter & Gamble. But here's the kicker. Vanguard is also the largest shareholder in BlackRock. Vanguard owns about 8% of BlackRock. So the company managing $7.5 trillion also owns a chunk of the company managing $10 trillion. It's a financial matryoshka doll, and it goes deeper. BlackRock invests heavily in Vanguard funds. BlackRock clients are Vanguard investors. They're intertwined in ways that make separation nearly impossible. This is what financial experts call common ownership. Multiple companies owned by the same institutional investors. It's not illegal. In fact, it's how modern investing works. But it raises questions. If the same shareholders own Coke and Pepsi, are those companies really competing? Well, yes, they still fight for market share. But some economists argue that common ownership might reduce competitive pressure. Others say there's no evidence of that. It's a debate that's still going on. The third leg of this triangle is State Street. State Street manages around $5.4 trillion. Smaller than BlackRock and Vanguard, but don't let that fool you. State Street might be the most embedded of all three. Why? Because State Street was founded in 1792. That makes it the second oldest financial institution in America. For over 200 years, they've been part of American finance. They financed railroads in the 1800s. They survived every financial panic, every depression, every crisis. State Street doesn't just manage money. They provide custodial services. That means they physically hold stocks and bonds on behalf of other investors. When you buy a stock through a mutual fund, there's a good chance State Street is the custodian holding it. They're the plumbing of modern finance. Invisible, but essential. State Street also created the first ever ETF, the S&P 500, launched in 1993. It now has around $700 billion in assets and is one of the most traded securities in the world. And just like BlackRock and Vanguard, State Street is a top shareholder in almost everything. Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Meta, Tesla. They own stakes in all of them. But here's where the triangle closes. State Street's largest shareholders: Vanguard and BlackRock. Vanguard owns about 13.23% of State Street. BlackRock owns 8.71%. So the two giants own the third giant. And State Street provides services to both of them. It's a closed loop. Vanguard owns BlackRock shares. BlackRock and Vanguard own State Street. State Street services both. They're interconnected in a way that makes them nearly impossible to separate. Let me make this crystal clear, because this is where things get wild. Vanguard owns about 8.7% of BlackRock. BlackRock can't own Vanguard directly because Vanguard has no external shareholders, but BlackRock invests client money into Vanguard funds, making them one of Vanguard's biggest customers. Vanguard and BlackRock both own significant stakes in State Street. Vanguard around 12 to 13%, BlackRock about 8%. State Street holds assets for both of them. All three are among the top shareholders in many public companies, and they participate in shareholder voting. This creates what's called interlocking ownership. It's not illegal. It's just complex. Some people compare this to the old Standard Oil Trust from the 1800s. John D. Rockefeller created a trust that controlled 41 oil companies under one structure. It was eventually broken up by the Supreme Court in 1911 for being a monopoly. But here's the difference. Rockefeller owned those companies outright. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street don't own these companies. They manage shares on behalf of clients. Legally, the owners are the millions of people with 401ks and pension funds, so antitrust law doesn't apply the same way. Still, the result is similar. Instead of one person controlling 90% of one industry, you have three firms holding major stakes across hundreds of industries, and that raises questions, big ones. If the same shareholders own competing companies, does that reduce competition? Some economists say yes, others say no, because the companies still compete for customers and market share. It's a debate that regulators are just starting to grapple with. Let's talk about what the big three actually own across different industries. In tech, their combined ownership in Apple is around 21%, Microsoft around 20.5%, Amazon about 19%, Alphabet around 16 to 17%. These aren't majority stakes, but they're plurality stakes, meaning no other shareholder comes close. In pharmaceuticals, they own roughly 15 to 20% of Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and Merck. During the COVID vaccine race, the same institutional investors owned both Pfizer and Moderna. Did they benefit no matter who won? Absolutely. In energy, they own about 22% of Exxon, 23.6% of Chevron, and 22.2% of ConocoPhillips. The companies that supposedly compete at the pump, same top shareholders. In banking, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, all owned roughly 18 to 22% by the big three. In food and beverage, Coca-Cola and PepsiCo, both about 22 to 23% owned by the same three firms. Kellogg's, General Mills, Nestle, same story. In media, Disney, Netflix, Comcast, Warner Bros., the big three are top shareholders in all of them. Here's what that means practically. You're not really choosing between Coke and Pepsi. You're choosing between two brands that share the same major investors. You're not choosing between an iPhone and a Google Pixel. You're picking between two companies with the same top shareholders. Does that mean there's no competition? No. These companies still fight hard for customers. Apple and Google aren't sitting around being friendly. But it does mean that at the shareholder level, there's a lot of overlap. And some researchers argue that might reduce the incentive for aggressive competition. Think about it. If you're a shareholder in both Coke and Pepsi, do you want them to start a brutal price war that hurts both companies' profits? Probably not. So how did this happen? It started with the rise of passive investing. Back in the 1970s, John Bogle at Vanguard had a revolutionary idea. Stop trying to pick individual stocks. just buy everything. He launched what became the first widely available index fund for individual investors, which tracks the entire market. Technically, a smaller institutional index fund existed a few years earlier, but Bogle's fund popularized the concept. Instead of paying high fees for active management, you pay almost nothing and get the average return of the market. It was genius, and it worked. By the 1990s and 2000s, index funds exploded in popularity. People poured money into Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street funds. 401k plans replaced pensions, and most 401ks offered index funds. Every year, billions of dollars flowed from individual investors into these three firms. They used that money to buy shares in every major company. By 2020, institutional investors owned about 80% of the S&P 500. And the big three are the largest institutional investors. This wasn't a conspiracy. It was just the natural result of everyone doing what seemed smart, buying low-cost index funds for retirement. But the side effect? Massive concentration of ownership. In 1950, most stocks were owned by individual investors. Today, most are owned by institutions. And three institutions dominate. Some economists call this the index fund problem. When everyone buys the same index, the same firms end up owning everything. So why doesn't the government do something? Three main reasons explain the historical inaction, but the legal landscape is currently shifting. The reasons. First, the antitrust argument has been a gray area. The original laws targeted traditional monopolies where a single entity owned all the assets. Standard Oil owned refineries. AT&T owned phone lines. BlackRock and Vanguard don't own Apple or Microsoft in that direct way. They manage shares on behalf of millions of clients, like those with a 401k, making them a middleman. However, this passive investor defense is now being actively challenged in court, with the DOJ and FTC clarifying that asset managers can be held liable if they use their influence to harm competition. Second, the economic impact is a major deterrent. If the government forced the immediate breakup and sale of these massive holdings, the sheer volume of divestment could tank the market value of the underlying companies, directly impacting the retirement savings of millions of Americans. Politically and practically, this is seen as impossible to execute without causing significant financial instability. Third, these firms are deeply embedded in the government's own operations. BlackRock's Aladdin Risk Assessment System is used by the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Treasury. Larry Fink has long advised presidents and Treasury secretaries, and State Street has centuries-old relationships with financial regulators. They aren't just big. They are considered essential to the functioning of modern finance. Current status. Some lawmakers and economists have proposed new regulations to limit how much institutional investors can own in competing companies. And while nothing's happened used to be the case, the legal ground is shifting. A multi-state antitrust lawsuit led by the Texas Attorney General is currently proceeding. In August 2025, a federal judge denied the asset manager's motion to dismiss most of the claims, allowing the case to move to the discovery phase. The outcome of this case could redefine antitrust law for institutional investors and have significant implications for future regulations. So here's the bottom line. Three companies, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, are collectively the largest single shareholder in approximately 88% of S&P 500 companies. They manage a combined total of around $20 to $25 trillion in assets, and that number continues to grow, primarily due to the rise of passive investing. They own shares in each other. They vote on each other's boards. They're interconnected in ways that make them nearly impossible to separate. Is this a monopoly? Legally, no. They don't own the companies outright. They manage shares for millions of everyday investors. But does it raise questions about competition, power, and wealth concentration? Absolutely. Some people see this as the natural evolution of capitalism, efficient, low-cost investing for everyone. Others see it as a dangerous concentration of economic power in too few hands. The truth? It's probably both. This system gives you low-cost access to the stock market through your 401k. But it also means three firms have enormous influence over corporate America. You can't escape it. But now at least you can see it. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. Three names you should know, because whether you realize it or not, they're part of your financial life every single day.